Hi, this is Omi Dashtari.
And Natasha McElhone. Our guest this week is William Sargent. He co-founded Framestore in 1986 and led its rise from an award-winning commercials production house to a world-renowned film and digital studio. During 3 decades, the company has worked on all the Harry Potter films and the JK Rowling Fantastic Beasts, Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity, James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy, Paul King's Paddington, Doctor Strange, Christopher Robin, Blade Runner 2049, and Marvel's Avengers series.
William and his team have won all major creative awards, including 3 Oscars, British Academy, Primetime Emmys, D&AD, Royal Television Society, and most recently over 100 awards for the newest format, virtual reality. Equally at home in Hollywood and government, he was Permanent Secretary Regulatory Reform at the Cabinet Office and Board Director of HM Treasury. He's currently a governor at Europe's largest arts complex, Southbank Center, the UK's government's innovation agency, Trinity College Dublin's Provost Council, and the London Mayor's Business Council.
William is a fellow for the Royal Society of Arts, member of BAFTA and the Academy Awards. He received a CBE in 2004 and was knighted by the Queen in 2008.
We will talk about rear projection,
stop motion animation,
Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity,
how music videos started the UK film industry,
George Lucas's vision of multi-platform storytelling,
how car manufacturing robots help in filmmaking,
tennis balls and fluorescent tape,
how to create dinosaurs,
the next decade of filmmaking.
Let's roll.
Hi, this is Omi Dashtari.
And Natasha McElhone. And with us today we have...
William Sargent.
William, such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
We will be talking about visual and special effects today. And before we get to your company Framestore and modern visual effects, I thought it would be great to create some context and take our listeners on a tour of what came before. Special effects have been part of film since the 1890s, actually.
Indeed.
Are there any milestone movies or techniques that you feel stand out as achievements?
Well, my all-time favorite one is Napoleon by Abel Gance, which I think was 1924, which I think is the ultimate in that, and hopefully it's going to be shown again soon. 8 hours long. And
wow.
When it finishes... He's only done the Battle of Italy, in fact, after 8 hours. Done with an orchestra. The London Symphony Orchestra did it a few years ago at the Barbican. And the visual effects in it are astonishing. It's all practical, all clever, thinking things through and all that sort of stuff and that. So that's the one. Obviously, there's iconics, the Harry Harryhausen and, the Millais brothers and all that sort of stuff and that. But as a great experience and as unbelievably clever camera work and visual effects, Napoleon.
Okay.
I might ask you something. This is a dim memory from possibly even 30 years ago, where I saw sunrise on the South Bank, which I think is from the 1920s. I don't know what this method is called, but it was kind of like a superimposed image where he's sitting as the farmer dreaming about the woman, the city woman who's trying to seduce him away from his wife, and his memory, how they're helping to tell the audience the story, or what his internal monologue is by having an image of the woman sort of transplanted on top of him and then removed, and it comes in and out and in and out. Yeah. Would that be classified as a special effect?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's several ways of doing it. You could, for example, have taken the film and then run it back again and added in other bits. So that's one technique. Or you could use rear screen projection, in which you'd have had literally rear screen projection.
Yeah.
And projected, behind him onto a screen behind him. So he was in an artificial setup. And that may have been the way. I'm not familiar with how they did that particular one. But yeah, I mean, or just editing. I mean, that's what I'm saying is in those days, going back to, up to the 60s and 70s, there's an awful lot of clever practical stuff, hence the word special effects as opposed to visual effects. Visual tends to be in the digital space and special tends to be in the physical, which is laboratories, chemicals, running films back again and re-exposing them, and things like that.
We did so much fun research for this one because the history of all this is so
more
fascinating.
Than I do, I have to say, because obviously I focused on the present.
No, absolutely, we will get to the present 100%, and you've seen a lot of the present evolve, actually, as a matter of fact. But it's such a fun thing to look at this because there is a lot of ingenuity, and when we talk about rear projection, just to give the listeners a little bit more of a sense. James Bond, Sean Connery driving with his car.
All rear projection.
That's always rear projection. That's
yeah.
like the thing that comes to mind when I think.
And of course, that got cleverer and cleverer because, of course, as the technology got better and cameras better and all this sort of stuff, the rear projection got more and more ambitious about what they tried to do. I mean, traditionally, it was people sitting in cars, obviously bouncing along, sort of with a projection going on behind them of a street in Naples or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, we still do some of that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's so nice. It's like it still uses techniques. I mean, you look at something like Barbie and that, and things like that. There's nothing wrong. I mean, those techniques are still used. When you break down a script, you're thinking, how are we going to do this? And then you go, well, we could do this, we could do that, we could shoot it for real, we could actually blow up that bridge, or we could do this, we could do a bit of rear projection, that's still used. So, I mean, all the techniques for 100 years are still completely valid.
Right.
So, yeah, definitely.
And we actually have filmmakers even nowadays that are trying to be purists.
Oh, Christopher Nolan will keep you going for a few hours on the subject, you know what I mean, and that. And he's this sort of, as you know, film, as opposed to digital, and models. I mean, most of his all his films are fundamentally using the old models. I mean, Star Wars, the model of the battleships and that. Christopher Nolan's films are all big 10-foot high models, and they get blown up, and
looks pretty impressive.
He's very fond of it. And as I say, those techniques are completely valid, because don't forget, there's budget, there's time. When you're doing work in film, it's about how much money have I got? How many, can I afford this actor? Can I afford to build a set? Can I not afford to build a set? If I can't afford to build a set, then why not just build a window and forget about building the house? So it's all about practical and creativity is about problem solving
and constraints.
Yeah, constraints.
Yeah.
And actually, the more constraints, the better.
Yeah, I completely agree. The low budget things that I've done have always been the most fun and the most creative.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's why Britain and the British craftspeople are adored by particularly American directors, because first of all, that's all they want to do. They want to be the carpenter or the lighting person. In America, everybody wants to be the director. Because the job that they're doing is just a stepping stone to becoming the director one day. Whereas in the UK, you have families. You go on a set, you've got the grandfather, the father, and the son in the carpentry department. Stunts in particular, you have that thing. So, and as a result, of course, they've seen it all, done it all. And when something breaks down, they go, yeah, just get a bit of wood and a bit of sellotape and put that together. Because they're just practical than that. It's not a big deal. And you don't get that in many other parts of the world. So
interesting, the notion of mastery of a craft and being content with that.
It's about being proud of actually this is what I do, and I do it really well, and I get better every day and that. And by the way, I've learned from my father, because I've been on the set with him from the age of 16, and then by the way, he learned from his father. You know what I mean? It's a very special part of the UK industry.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll have seen this.
Yeah.
You look at you
Definitely.
You literally think, hang on, he looks like him and he looks like him. You find out that they're,
It's true in camera departments too.
Yeah. Oh, completely. As I say, all the crafts, all the physical crafts on set. You don't have that in the digital space yet. I mean, because they're too young. Right. But in fact, actually you do it. You got fathers and sons now already in companies. But on the set, it goes back generations. And the bit that I love, if you look at the credits, stuntmen. Yeah. There were two families, the Powells, and I can't remember who the others are. And literally, if you look at the 50 people, 30 of them will have the same surname. I mean, it's astonishing, but the stunts. And then the others are physical effects, the Corballs. There are three Corball brothers. And they are, and what's interesting there is no one's ever done this. They have won, I think, the most Oscars of anybody on the planet.
Really?
Yeah. I'll tell you why, because they're physical effects, right? And every Oscar for visual effects has to have one physical effects person. So you got 4 people you can nominate, and the physical effects chapter is a lot of votes. So if you don't put a physical effects person on it, you lose their votes.
Interesting.
Right? And so the Corballs, the 3 brothers, basically they do every single movie in the UK between the 3 of them. And therefore, they get nominated for at least 3 of the 5 Oscars every year. And if they don't win, it's a most unusual occasion. So therefore, going back 20 years.
Explain physical effects. What does that mean?
Blowing things up.
Yeah.
Right. Smoke.
Rain, even. Right?
Physical. Yeah, rain. Rain is physical effects. Basically, cars. That's a physical. Car chases, which of course are digital these days. But So physical effects is what it says.
Right.
Physical
atoms in the space.
On the set, normally. I mean, models are physical effects.
Yeah.
Where you're physically doing so. Yeah, it means physical.
Gotcha. I'm going to throw out some maybe movie names or directors that moved the special effects world forward for a little bit, and then we can do a quick fire round.
So you probably know more than I do.
I think you probably know a lot. Let's talk about King Kong.
Well, that's, sort of models and animatronics, stop motion, which, to this day, obviously, Nick Park, Aardman and things like that. So again, a technique that's been around 100 years that, Wallace and Gromit.
And it's still being used, exactly.
Oh, completely. Yeah. A certain person is needed to do that, because the idea, when you see Nick Park, who's obviously the sweetest man on the planet, but it's a frame at a time and moving the guys.
Patience,
it is
the
mind-boggling.
diligence,
we have such admiration for people like him and him in particular. We know Aardman and the guys there really well, but it's an art form.
Film is how many frames per second? 60?
No, 24.
Sorry, 24. Games are 60, sorry.
24 and 25. Television and film is 24 and 25 frames a second.
So 25. So if you want to do stop motion, you really need to do 25 movements for every second.
Yeah. You can choose to be lazy and sort of let 3 seconds, let's say 3 frames of the same thing. But then, of course, if you're looking for the full motion and all of that, Yeah. And that's the example of practicality, because, of course, you would then choose to not do 25 frames a second. Mm-hmm. You would be going, you know what? Let's just have a moon. The guy's gazing at the moon for 3 seconds, so I've just got to do one shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas when you're doing the emotional, the eyebrows got to go up and that, and literally you got to do that. And you got to move. You literally go in there, you move it, you click, you move it, click. It's, certain mindset.
I was just thinking about how film, we will talk about film first because TV, I guess, is more recent, but that people went to the movies to kind of see their dreams projected on a screen, and rather than it be a solitary experience of dreaming that we all have, there's something about a shared collective experience of watching something that's like a sort of dreamscape, but on a screen with other people, that's magical and that's transformative. And when we were talking yesterday about special effects, the whole situation that we're in now, where most movies that are incredibly popular contain a lot of this. And the irony is, as an actor, when, let's say, a sci-fi movie or TV show is being pitched to you, the seduction is always, there's going to be lots of CGI, lots of green screen, but really it's about the relationships between the people. That's why we want you to come on board. And it's completely played down the sort of...
No, they're completely right. Sorry, let's right. They are right. All we're doing is supporting the storytelling and the story.
But what I think's interesting is what audiences are going for is actually the effects. Because for actors, I'm speaking very broadly, but one is deterred by something where there's a lot of green screen and CGI, because you just feel you're not necessary, you're not needed, your skill set isn't really going to be utilized. You're mostly going to be standing around waiting for the geniuses to tell the story.
Let me give you let me counter that one.
Yeah.
I made a film a decade ago called Gravity, Sandra Bullock.
Oh, that little...
we brought it up earlier. Yeah.
That little art house film. And
it was considered by Warner to be an art house movie by an art house director. Hence, the budget was, 1/3 of a normal movie. And that we had to reverse engineer to how we were going to make it. But, Sandra was in a light box, 10 foot by 10 foot, right? With us projecting the images were spinning behind her and around her but her acting was mind-boggling.
Yeah.
She was in that box for days after days after days.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I'm sure when Alfonso pitched it to her, it is about her and it is about the performance. And I
think that film is different and was recognized as being different, as being you were in someone's mind to a large degree, and he's an extraordinary filmmaker who works with character and story mostly. Yeah. So I think
Notting
that's
Hill?
Possibly...
Let me take you back to Notting Hill, right? So what we call the seasonal walk, which is when he's obviously he's obviously sort of idiot, moved on and sort of passed on the girl, so to speak. You know what I mean? And is moping up Portobello. Originally, it says, him starting to walk, and then caption 1 year later. You do a little bit of a thing. And my partner sort of persuaded when the producer was out of the room, the director, that we could actually do something quite more interesting than just doing a caption saying 1 year later and he's at the end of. And so as he walks down, you go through the whole 1 year.
Yeah,
it's
I
my
remember.
all-time favorite shots,
It's
right?
beautiful,
And people don't even think of it as a visual effect shot. But things like, for example, the lady at the front who you see occasionally alongside him as he's walking, she's not pregnant at the beginning of the walk. Then eventually she's pregnant, and then eventually right at the end she's got the baby in her arms. And you get the seasons, the autumn, and that is just seamless. Nobody in the cinema goes, I'm
That's
watching.
a special effect. Yeah, of course.
I'm sure Hugh didn't think, oh yes, this is because it wasn't green screen and so So what I'm trying to say is that the Marvel movies, when they work, it's story and character. The visual effects is just underpinning the experience in that, and so for the actors, yes, they are. We did a film called Guardians of the Galaxy, in which obviously some of the big characters are CG. And
Groot.
And it's interesting, and I think that people have found a way now from the acting side, and the combination has come much closer without it being, I hope, artificial. Because with pre-visualization, which we now do, we pre-visualize the whole scene, and so as the actor, you're able to look at the screen and go, oh, I see, so that. Because you're seeing your role, but you're also seeing everything else that actually we're going to build around you. And so you're no longer going into a situation where it's like, well, just stand there and there's a tennis ball at the end of the rod, and can you just fall in love with this tennis ball, right? It's actually, you can now see.
Tennis ball is good. It's. I think it's when it's a strip of tape.
Oh, yeah, well, okay. Okay, so
tennis ball is at least spherical.
So you can fall in love with a tennis ball with a strip of tape. Okay.
Sometimes I draw a face on the strip of tape, and that helps.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, Natasha's drawing her line somewhere. And the tennis ball is
so I didn't mean to disagree with you, but
no, I love it.
Great.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We love these conversations. I'm going to throw in a name, George Lucas. He did a lot in this space with Star Wars.
Oh, he's sort of, well, who we are and who our community is, you trace it back to George very much. And you trace more than that back to George. You trace the vision that we run our business under, that storytelling is about now different platforms, that we deliver on an iPhone and an iMac, on an immersive experience and so forth. And George is and everyone's aspiring to that next world, which will be there in 10 years' time. But you forget that actually George really created that because, you go to a computer game that's about an obscure planet that you flew by in one of the episodes. You get a comic, you get a book, you get a computer game. He created this world. And what was curious is that nobody really followed in behind. So we've had this big gap of, pick a number, 40 years. And now we're all talking about multiverses and different types of worlds and enjoying the characters in different places and that. But George, not only did he do visual effects, as in the next generation, but he did the next generation of consuming content and stories.
Interesting, yeah. I never thought of him of that. But yeah, I remember Lucas Games was actually a unit that he had created.
It just follows. Because he was one person who owned the entire business and could do his thing, and that he let the story go. And it's not about just a straight line about what the film, and then we'll make a game of the film. It's like, well, they'll go and find a story, which is an obscure bit of the film or a character in the film, and go, where does this character come from? And then follow that.
Develop it.
Other line, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's the magic of the next decade that we have. And that's why if you take it as an actor, at present, everybody in filmmaking, apart from us, is a freelancer. As in, they work in the film, they do X number of weeks, and then they move on to the next film on that. But of course, what will happen is that role that you create will now go into different places and different times and so forth, and that, including what's controversial, being cyberscanned and going back to when you were young and maybe when you're old. So the actor and the acting experience, because the actor carries a story normally, is going to take you to places where, in theory, you could do 10 years of something. So it's not about doing sequels, and being contracted for sequels, but it's about, well, if we decide to go down a computer game, it would be great if we could have you, to be part of that, et cetera, et cetera. And say in 10 years' time, the acting experience and earning opportunities for it will be very different from where it was 10 years ago. And obviously we had the trauma of the strike last year, of which this was part of the aspect, correctly so, in terms of earnings. But it, unfortunately, no one ever spoke about the vision about where it could
where
go.
it's going.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In that, and obviously, it's about making sure that when it does go there, that
Yeah, there's some checks and balances in place. And,
exactly.
Yeah,
But
some protection.
this is a very exciting time.
I just wanted to ask you, how did you get into this side of the film industry? What was it? What was the prompt? What was your earliest memory?
Oh, well, like everybody, you're into film, and you can't really be in our industry in any aspect without having an interest in film. So that's the first thing. I wanted to be a writer. I actually started as a writer. That was my passion. Was to,
What age are we now?
we're talking about 10, 11, 12.
Wow. Okay.
So at school, came back. I was raised in Brazil and came back to Ireland, and so I'm in a boarding school. And so your imagination, you have to. Part of being in a boarding school is, you're on your own, and you obviously have friends. But the point is, your world is the world that you create yourself,
Yes.
and so that takes you to imagination and so forth, and writing. And I was passionate about writing, loved writing. I discovered my Irish heritage. W.B. Yeats and Sean O'Casey, and I just would think, wow, this is a whole world that I didn't know when I was being raised in Ireland. Samuel Beckett and all this, and as I pointed out at dinner parties when I came to London, all the great literature of the UK in the last 200 years is Irish.
From this tiny island.
Oscar Wilde,
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's quite boring at dinner parties for that reason. So that's what I wanted to do, was to write. But I very quickly realized that, if you were writing screen work, someone's got to get it onto a screen. And so I also didn't want to study a creative subject. I wanted to study business. Mm-hmm. So I went to Trinity in Dublin to study business, knowing that I wanted to be a writer and so forth and that. And so it naturally led me. So everything I've done since, in terms of, have all been creative businesses with world-class creatives. And with that part of me, I've enabled the making of the films, so I've produced as well. And in Dublin, I had a business in the music industry. And so I've had a love affair with creative people, great artists. So
facilitating.
I perceive myself as a facilitator and an enabler. That's all I do.
Yeah.
And other people do
And what was the moment where you thought, well, I'm going to be more effective as a facilitator and a sort of provider of these services rather than actually putting pen to paper and sitting and writing a script?
I think the day we decided to found Framestore, which was November, I can't remember the exact date, 1985.
Oh, 1985.
We started in March 86, but actually it was at a dinner where I was bored with my friends and partner at the time, moaning about their jobs and saying, guys, you're fabulous at what you do, but why don't we just set up? And I was writing at the time, so I had the time to go around raising funds and so forth. So I think the day we started Framestore, 2nd of March 86, was when I sort of felt, this is really
your calling.
Well, the calling had already happened because I'd been in the music business and so forth, but that was the point at which we started something new. Mm-hmm. And we were the first people to use computers in filmmaking.
I was going to say no one else was providing this.
No,
right?
Exactly that. They were using the technology that we used was being used for editing. Ironically, well, you guys had the same technology in that, and we had the vision of using it for animation, which it wasn't designed for. And we did, a culture club video in which we took films like Claudia Cardinali and Brigitte Bardot and so forth, and cut them out of the films that they were in, and put them in the set with Boy George. Do you remember that?
I remember
God
that.
Loves Woman, I think
I
is the name.
remember that. That's crazy.
Yeah, the first song that failed. So they had 8 number ones, and then we spent a fortune making this particular one, and sadly the song didn't do well. But the video was pioneering. It was and they were dancing on the set. We had them dancing on the stage with Boy George. That was the first show we did. It was a Sunday. 2nd of March was a Sunday, and we actually started working on the Sunday on that video. That was our first ever job.
Wow.
And
give us a sense of the landscape at that time. What else was going on?
We are now talking about
86, right?
We're talking about recessions. We started a business in what was considered to be a lunatic time to start because things weren't good shape. Don't forget, the UK didn't really have a film industry
right,
the way we have now, which is the positive because everybody had to work in advertising and they had to work in pop promos. Pop promos was the action. Working title. Started. Then Tim and Eric started then as a pop promo company, Steve Barron and Limelight and all that. So the UK, so pop promos, MTV founded, I think, the year before, 2 years before that.
Right.
And they were spending $1 million on a pop promo. I mean, the Culture Club won, we did David Bowie, Michael Jackson, Madonna's, all that sort of stuff. They were talking about like $500,000 to $1 million budgets for launching, because MTV was like, made you, so to speak, on that. So that was really that was the young directors. All the people then became big directors in the next 20 years, all started as music videos directors, right? You could make 2 videos a week. Literally, in those days, right? Film wasn't, I don't recall it being as vibrant in terms of storytelling. I'm trying to remember the films around at the time. But the industry in the UK was a hand-to-mouth, you get a commercial once a month, and you might get a music video for Tuppence Halfpenny, and then as a cameraman, so for example. The actor certainly didn't have the amount of, the television was the BBC and ITV, which was obviously not ITV, was Granada and on the weekend, and that might make the occasional drama. So
I guess there was quite a lot of independent films going on. I'm just thinking back to then with sort of Merchant Ivory and Ken Loach films, Mike Leigh.
Oh yeah,
all of those.
They were, but you were talking about films made literally on a shoestring.
Yeah.
And you had Channel 4 just started, I think, hadn't it? And so I think that was really the bit that underpinned the innovation in independent filmmaking was Channel 4. They did Film on 4. Do you remember? David Rose, I think, was the man. So the UK was a very nimble, both storytelling as well as craft and that. And you made a living, but quite often just about, unless you were like a major. And you had people living in the UK, like Kubrick obviously lived, out of London, not far away, making his movies and so forth. But it was and everything was physical and chemicals. You had labs, and our skills were done by stop motion and lab technology stuff and that, So it was a sector that was probably pick figure 3, 4, 5% of what it is today.
Take us to the major beats then. How did this evolve?
In terms of what happened then?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, as I said, the UK, we at the time, and we're talking about the 80s, were world-class in advertising. Mm-hmm. So many of the we would win every award at Cannes at the big international effect and that. So the UK directors, if you remember, Ridley Scott was doing commercials, Hugh Hudson, Alan Parker. Then you had David Putnam, who was a producer. They all worked at advertising agencies, and then they all spun off. They all did their first advertising, their first film working for an advertising agency, and suddenly it became big money. Advertising became big money and big budgets and that. And the UK was like the dominant player in the world. We won everything. We did the biggest things and so forth. And then underneath that was the pop promo. So the two things that really set in stone the UK was that pop promo culture. There's Eric and Tim and the whole community, Limelight and all of that. And then the advertising guys. And then, if you remember, Ridley Scott then went into, I'm trying to remember what his first film was, but they all made their first films on a shoestring, but they could do, because they were making so much money, and the people that worked with them, like the camera people, and that made so much money that when they said, by the way, guys, we're going to take 3 months off, and you're going to work for me, and you're going to get paid 1/10 of what I usually pay you, but we're going to make a movie. And of course, everybody wanted to make a feature. We all aspired. If you think about it, there was this, the idea of working in a feature film in the mid-'80s in the UK was like, oh my God, that'd be so cool, And so when someone was actually making a feature film, I mean, I remember I was in Dublin, I remember, going to film, it'd be interesting to see if you know, there's a film called Swalk, SWALK.
Sue with a Loving Kiss. Yeah.
Exactly, right.
I don't remember the film.
David Putnam. That was David Putnam, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was Alan Parker, wasn't it? I think it was Alan Parker. And so you had these guys who were making a living doing something else, desperate to make a feature film, and then would finally get something together and they'd made them. And so slowly but surely from the early 80s through to the late 80s, the transition happened when, first of all, the UK was world class in, let's say, promos and advertising. And then the indie movies started to crack, and Working Title wanted to make movies. Pop promos was just the way you made a living, so to speak, and then they made one with Daniel Day-Lewis, My Laundrette.
My Beautiful Laundrette. An amazing film.
And so there was a whole series of those milestones in the mid-'80s.
I was thinking, and I guess there probably was, must have been some CGI in Thelma and Louise. That's the first Ridley Scott film I saw.
Yeah, if there was, and I don't know, it probably would have been rear screen projection and things like that.
I think it was,
It may or may not
just because of all the car.
Yeah. I mean, I tell you what we did early on quite often, which one shouldn't, I certainly won't name any names. We did a lot of, corrections on actors, with zits and things like that,
In
so
post.
there was a lot of digital things where you had to fix things, a boom in shot or that, or the costume being wrong or whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Actually, talking about, was it matte painting? What was it? That was an art form.
Oh, so matte
back in the
painting
day,
is
wasn't it?
actually a stunning art form. So obviously that's where, so for example, you are taking a shot of a beach, say, for example, and in the background you want a gigantic castle. So you obviously paint these, and these artists were amazing. You paint the what you wanted to be seen, and you would cut, you'd have it shaped around the beach and that, and then you put that in front of the cat, and then you film through it, so the two combined. But that's physical.
It was physical, but I can't remember the movie. It was about leprechauns.
The Dark Crystal?
Willy Wonka?
No. Something to do with, it was in the 60s. And the guy, the matte painter, who was very famous in that one, apparently it was so good, the leprechauns were so brilliantly done that they didn't get nominated in the category because no one thought that there was any special effects.
Yeah. Well, you see, for
Can
us...
you imagine the frustration? He made it, they talk about the joins or something, that there were just no joins.
And that's, you see, we are known and take huge pride in what we call invisible effects.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, I mean, obviously, these days with, Marvels and big space films and that, this visually. You look at somebody and you get it, right? And when they're bad, you realize that they're bad. They should be invisible, but whatever. But the whole thing's artificial. But actually, a significant amount of work still to this day. I mean, we did 34 movies last year, and not all of them were whiz bangs and so forth, and that a lot of it's invisible, right? And it's visible at one end where you're painting out the double yellow lines in Notting Hill on wherever Paddington's been filmed, or getting rid of in the old days the aerials on people's houses, right? So that's one form of visual effects, and that what I call production effects, really, in many ways, because it's an alternative to people used to have to go and bribe people to take the aerial down from the house or so in the end shot and be like, oh, that'll cost me 500 quid to take that down in here. And then people like us would come along and go, yeah, we can just paint it out. Right? But equally, you've got a situation, there was a thing we did for, I can't remember, the exterior paint company. And we did this ad, and we would show it to people as part of our most proud, we did a show reel, and so you show this now. We'd show this, and directors would go, okay, I get that. So what? We say, well, so it was a. Did
you have to show them before and after for them to know the working role?
It was a guy, a lighthouse keeper, standing in front of a lighthouse in the middle of a storm, saying, "This paint is amazing," because and it was like 30 seconds, and you go, yeah, whatever. And he just took him somewhere, and he stuck him on in an island somewhere, and he filmed it and whatever. Not a single thing was real, right? Because we actually filmed the actor, obviously, just standing out. And then we dropped in the lighthouse, then we dropped in the house next to it, then we dropped in the hill over there, then we did this, and then finally we dropped in the rain and the storm, right? And so literally the entire thing, and people used to go, and we used to deliberately show this at the end of a show reel, because people say, yeah, okay, I love all the other stuff. It's all fine. I can see all that. It's really amazing. You guys do great work. But what's this thing that you showed at the end? And we go, well, and it would be completely
So you're showing
invisible.
them the seamlessness.
We were showing them the seamlessness.
Yeah.
Let me take you to the 90s. I remember movies like Terminator, Jim Cameron.
Big milestone.
Jurassic Park, for instance, right?
7 minutes only.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we did Walking with Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
3 hours.
Oh, you did that? You did that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, Jurassic Park had come out not long before. In fact, there was Young Sherlock, if you remember, was actually the one before that Spielberg did, which people thought of as, quite often people refer to it as the first digital visual effects type thing, right? About the zitty seconds. So the first one really that people look at as a big milestone, forget about Star Wars, because a lot of that was sort of physical, so to speak, of that. There was no digital in the early Star Wars and that. The Jurassic Park was a big deal. Right? But it's either 7 or 8 minutes, but it's not a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so a chap called Tim Haynes, a producer of the BBC, had this idea of making a wildlife genre type dinosaur series, but totally science based, right? And Primetime BBC One, whatever. And so, of course, because one of our competitors in San Francisco, George's company, ILM, had done that, off he goes and says, great, and they quote him a price that's just like, we're talking about science programs here at the BBC. You're talking about £40,000 an hour. Okay? Anyway, to cut a long story short, he ended up on our doorstep, and my partner, who sadly passed away a few weeks ago, Mike Milne, sort of took him in and sat down, and we worked out how to do it on a British budget as opposed to a Hollywood budget for the BBC. And as a proof of concept, because nobody believed we could do it, we, together with the BBC, they put in a bit of money and then we put in a lot of time. We did a 90-second pilot of just dinosaurs in the wild, just to see if you could pull off this. Because the idea is wildlife shows are like, visual effects are like second. Part of the technique is to have lots of techniques within the shot, but they're all different. And so your brain gives up trying to work out, that's a matte painting, that's a back projection, that's a whatever. So you mix all the techniques quite often within the one shot. And so the brain just stops thinking, okay, I'll just believe it. You know what I mean? So that's part of the skill. Okay? Whereas with wildlife programs, you don't have fast cuts. You don't have like cut, which is visual effects is quite important to be able to cut away, cut this, cut that. So that way, wildlife is like, we're looking at this line for like 5 minutes. And it's just moseying around, takes a pee, goes a bit further, licks his partner, whatever it is. And, so to do CGI and to make something about dinosaurs, which obviously don't exist, but to do it in a wildlife format, to pretend that the guy or girl camera person's been sitting in this field for like months waiting for this shot. That's like whole amazing thing.
So what's involved with that? Who gets? So we have people who create the models. We have people who animate the stuff.
It's all CGI.
In CGI, yeah. I mean, I'm talking about CGI models.
Well, the first thing you had to do was you had to work out, what is a dinosaur? Because don't forget, they don't exist.
Yeah.
So the first thing we did was in our cinema in Fitzrovia, we got 6 of the world's top paleontologists in a room for, I can't remember, it was a week or 2 weeks, something like that, and questioned them.
How much fun was that?
and the beauty of it was, so 6 of the best, most important, academics in the world on the subject. And we stick them in the cinema, and we got all our guys as the audience and going, what about this? How do they move? How tall are they? How fast do they move? What color? Don't forget, there's no color reference for dinosaurs.
Yeah, we just assumed they're greenish.
Right? Okay.
Green.
And so that's part of the achievement. So that's the first thing. Every paleontologist disagreed with one another. So the first thing that happened is you had the 6 top specialists in the world who didn't agree on blue is blue. As in, they open their mouths like 6 inches. No, they don't. They open them a foot. No, they don't. The necks, for example. I can't remember the names of the dinosaurs, but there's one that everyone assumes is up there getting the stuff out of the tree. Well, we worked out...
The Brontosaurus.
Your son will definitely be able to tell you all the names.
Yeah, but the point is, we worked out that he couldn't have done that because if you look at the bone structure, they can't lift their necks. So we were setting out to create the models, the CG models, and said, well, hang on a sec, if you take, and we had obviously the bones, we said, well, you can't lift the head beyond that because look, if you have that bone structure, and so basically what's happened is that the world of paleontologists has basically adapted to our series as a result. So the world of knowledge now, number one, and then things like the colors. So we said, well, there's no colors. So we go to London Zoo and various other places. And we look at a monkey with, I can't remember what the monkey is, but the other one's got a multicolored bum.
Yeah.
Right?
What, the baboon?
It's a baboon, probably, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, you look at that and you go, well, why couldn't a dinosaur have had a multicolored bum? And so suddenly as the artists, the painters and the illustrators and that go, well, I quite fancy sticking like a little purple stripe on this particular guy or girl. You know what I mean? And so we did the paleontology where, and so we'd go off to do things like with elephants at London Zoo and look at how they move and that. So we extrapolated from the current world backwards and et cetera, and that, because in the absence of paleontologists being able to brief us, we thought, well, okay, well, fine, we've got a thing. And we obviously went back to them and said, well, this is what we think we're doing.
Is this viable? Yeah. And what's fascinating about that specifically is that I guess paleontologists wouldn't have necessarily had a reason to go through how they moved, whereas that's all you're interested in.
If you're going to animate you got to do it. Yeah. So when we came back and showed them the thing at the end, they were in tears.
Wow.
Because they all said to a man and woman, you've just brought my world. I never thought in my lifetime that I would actually see these guys alive and that, and you've changed. And they all said, well, you've now changed the science or the learning of dinosaurs changes.
Well, you've looked at it from another perspective. I was going to say, I'm sure also as animators at that stage, the way that you're studying body language and how people move is completely different to everyone else.
Exactly. And everything we do, if we're creating aliens in an environment like that, it's all based on physics. One of my partners, Tim Weber, who did Gravity, he's a first in physics from Oxford. Everything we do is about the physics. If we did a dog. I can't remember what the film was now, flying at 200 miles an hour, a little puppy with 40 years, right? Yeah. And it was a superhero dog, right? Flying at 200 miles an hour. Well, you look at that and you go, okay, so what happens if a dog's flying at 200? The jowls are going, whatever and that. And so, and of course, we're creating all the hairs. So the hairs, like on Golden Compass, for example, I can't remember, there were 6 billion hairs on the polar bear. All of them rendered, right? Incredible. And so you have control of every aspect of that. And so then you're applying the physics. Then you're saying, well, what would happen if a dog is flying at 200 miles an hour? What happens as
And so do you watch animal? I was thinking about Paddington Bear. Do you study bears?
Oh, like obsessively.
Yeah.
Obsessively.
Which kind?
Paddington took us 9 months to decide on his height.
I mean, that's pretty much, I'd say it's in my top 5 ever movies.
Well, you'll be pleased because in the next few months you'll be seeing
another one.
The next one.
I know.
Which is very exciting.
I'm waiting. I'm not leaving the country.
Well, I was really pissed off because they omitted to tell me that we were filming in Machu Picchu, which of course is now closed. And I was like, hang on a sec, guys. Like, I found out 4 weeks after we spent a week shooting there. I was like, if I'd have known that, I'd have been carrying the bags, like that,
Yeah.
So, but no, this next one's very exciting.
It phenomenal?
Very exciting, yeah.
Well, you already know that Machu Picchu feature, so you heard it here first.
I've given away.
So we talked about the 90s. Tell us about the state of the art. Where are we now with CGI and with Framestore? Tell us a little bit about where you're at with the company.
They're obviously interlinked, so to speak, in that. The thing that we do with directors and anybody in studios, because quite often we're working on the project before the studio's appointed a director. Because we do a lot of early conceptual work, and that it means we don't necessarily work on the movie because A, we might not have the capacity, and B, the director might wish to work with somebody else. But the point is, we do a lot of early stuff in that. And the point is that you get the writer and the director to write what they want to write. It's just like guys in the old days, they come in and say, "Show us your visual reel," and then we'll go away and write to the existing art form. And we say, no, just please don't do that. Just do whatever you want to do. And then we'll look at it and go, okay, how are we going to do this and whatever. And so the potential has always been infinitesimal, number one. Secondly, it is about supporting the story. All that we do is supports the story, which in turn supports the creative community on it, whether it be actors, directors and camera people, because they're quite often the 3 people that we're engaged with in turning out the performance or the look or whatever and that. So where we are is that if you've got time and money and ambition, you can go to the moon, so to speak, which obviously everybody has many times. But I suppose the analogy which I'm beginning to use with people, because we're talking about augmented reality at the moment and virtual reality and all those types of things and that. And we're also talking about which people are talking about, obviously, AI, artificial intelligence. We tend to call it machine learning rather than AI, which you've been using already for 15 years, which is the irony of the situation. So we are very much a applied technology company, which is applied to the creative process. In this case, filmmaking. And we tend to invent the application rather than the technology. That makes sense. So in Gravity, we're using robots from car manufacturing because that gave us the precision that we needed to get close up to Sandra and at speed and things like that. You know what I mean? So
you mean the cameras?
Yeah, to move the cameras. Yeah. But the precision we needed. We basically, Tim identified that the car industry had this type of technology. And
Because it could get closer, or because it would be smoother?
It'd be smoother, it'd get closer, it'd be quicker, it'd be very precise and all this sort of stuff in that. And so now everybody uses it.
Right.
But they didn't. So that's an example of you're looking around thinking, what can I use to do what I'm trying to do? So really...
So how many techniques do you think your company is responsible for having innovated?
Well, we've done...
That we all use now?
The last time I looked, which was 3 years ago, because I was asked the question, and we had done 56 innovations at that point, right? And they're not all technology, like they are how you produce something, how you organize something as well. And so from the very beginning, we've had a reputation, and it's not that we pursue it in that, but of doing things, finding new ways of solving a problem. All these things are solving a problem. You know what I mean? A money problem, a time problem, a technique problem, whatever. And so, yeah.
So it doesn't, from what you've said, it doesn't sound like you do work within constraints. You say, okay, we'll find a way to make this possible.
Well, the constraints, the visual that I use is if you have a box and you got, say whatever number of boxes in the walls it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 8, isn't it? Whatever. And they're all the constraints, and you define them. One's a price, one's money, one's the ability time of the capper person, one's time, whatever. And then you're basically going, right, this is what I want to do. And then you go, okay, well, I can't do that. I can't do that. Okay, fine. Well, can I move that wall? So basically what you're doing is you're trying to say, well, can I move a wall in order to achieve that, right? And in computer games, which you'll be familiar with, which I've been in as well for many years, you've got a fixed pot. So the developers, the programmers are the stars in computer games, right? Because they are trying to get more features out of a fixed box. Mm-hmm. The PlayStation will be out for like 7 years. And so there isn't a new version every year that can do more, right? And so, but you have to innovate and become more ambitious. And therefore you can only put so many digits in. But the secret is using less digits to do more things. So the clever programmers can do a feature with less than another programmer who's not so clever, right? And so we all have constraints that we use. I'm not trying to be trite about saying it's open-ended. Yeah. But it's really down to the ambition of people. And if you go back to desktop publishing, and when the Mac came out and you could do a magazine, everybody said, oh, that's it, the end of the magazine world. Because what happens is that, therefore, people like running a cricket club could now do a newsletter. Instead of having to pay 20 grand to a printer and a design company and so forth, they just sit in themselves and do that. And so basically the bottom end moves up because they can do more, but of course the top end moves up. Yeah. And so it evolves over. So there isn't a technology that suddenly makes everybody obsolescent. It's like it evolves, sometimes very quickly and sometimes very slowly, but it evolves.
I like that point, and I think it goes back to what you were saying about the writer's strike earlier, because there was no story that was the positive story of how all this can evolve, right? We were only talking about the fear-based stuff, and rightfully so. Obviously, there are fears that are warranted that need to be addressed, but at the same time, you need to have that story. And I love how you're talking about this, because really, we need to tell the stories how these technologies can actually evolve and empower everybody.
We are very clear that AI is a very positive thing from our point of view. Now, it may not be positive for some individuals in the company or elsewhere in that, and therefore our obligation is to train them, to retrain them, to whatever. But from our point of view, and you may or may not have heard me, because I'm certainly in government circles at the moment, I'm bashing down the doors at DCMS and Treasury and DSIT, which is the technology department, which is the UK has the opportunity to lead the world in this space. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, right? And it's now. Right. And people hear the message, but the question is, how are we going to do this? Okay. So for me, this is very positive, and it creates jobs, but it also costs jobs. Yeah. But then every industrial revolution that's come along has done this. You take our company. We've probably got at least 50 job titles today that we didn't have 3 years ago. I mean, the job titles and the ones you see on movies, you sort of go, okay, what's that guy do? What's that girl do? It's data wrangler, for example, is the most basic of them. They came out about 5-6 years ago. It's about they're capturing the data and they're wrangling the data. But it's quite it's not a junior role, but it's a role just capturing the data of what's happening on set.
What's the next chapter looking like?
Well, we put out, and listeners can look it up, a film called Flight, which is Flite. And it was something that we did, real-time image making, which is what a computer console,
yes,
computer game.
Video games are
it's real-time.
Real-time rendered, yeah.
And obviously Epic created a thing called Unreal Engine, which many of the games are made with.
Yes.
And we have set out to bring that into the filmmaking pipeline. Because what we do is not real time.
Right.
We will make an image and then we'll send it off to be processed by our computers, and then it comes back and then we change it and then we go off again and comes back and so forth now. So we have set out to bring that Unreal Engine technology into film pipeline, because film is 16 times more digits, for example, than a television image. Right. Okay. So it's very power hungry and processing hungry. And if you can turn around and do this in real time, you do several things. You can sit with the director and go, okay, we'll do this, that, and the other. And you go, great, well, there it is. What do you think? So the moment we go, come back tomorrow and we'll show you. We'll show you.
Right.
Okay.
So this helps with immediacy.
Exactly. So people talk about AI as being the big thing impacting our industry negatively, which we don't agree with, but forgetting about real time is equally an exciting opportunity, which is equally revolutionary. Right. Now, put the two together, and you've got a place that's going to be very different in 5 to 10 years' time.
Right.
Okay. Both are exciting, but both are threats. But the opportunities that they create, if you're able to evolve and absorb and develop, are mind-boggling. Okay.
Could you envision
Flight? So just to say, so if you go and look at if you go on YouTube, not only is the 12-minute film on there, but also 3 or 4 films about the making of. So, for example, we did one from the actor's point of view. So there's a little 2-minuter of the actors talking about the experience. Let me take you back 10 years. And gravity basically changed the way films are made. So today films are made with LED screens and so forth. So we pioneer that. Okay. That's how we make films today. Everybody makes that.
Right.
6 months ago, we launched Flight, which is our vision of the next decade, how films are going to get made.
Wow.
So if you want to know about, don't ask me the question, just go and look at the movie.
Sure.
Go and look at Flight and the associated movies and all that. And that's the best answer I can give you.
Perfect. Yeah. We'll get all the listeners to have a look at that. What do you feel about AR, VR and that world? Is there a world where you see something like a choose your own adventure movie merging with gaming? Is there some
all of that? The answer is I don't know. Look, I am desperate to find, Tim Haynes with Walking with Dinosaurs transformed what we did. We did Gulliver's Travels, and if you remember, a miniseries for NBC, which again was also revolutionary in that. But in each case, there was an individual, Duncan Kenworthy, who, made Notting Hill and various other things. For us, David Heyman, for example, with Harry Potter. So we have had people in our lives on the client side who've basically enabled us, and then we've enabled them. It's a partnership.
Right.
Okay. There is someone out there, a director, who's going to deliver a story across different media. I call them platforms. So, for example, the feature film, the 2 to 3 hour feature film, will not necessarily be the starting line. It might be an immersive experience. It might be a theme park experience, as they did with Pirates of the Caribbean, for example, or whatever, right? Where you start the story, follow things, which is why I said earlier in this talk, they'll look back and go, actually, Lucas did this before anybody else thought about this.
Yeah,
right?
Platforms.
And so it's so exciting because you will then experience things. So I'll give you an example with augmented. We spent the last 5 years working with Apple on Vision Pro.
Wow.
Finally, we can talk about it. But and with augmented reality and things like that, you will not have your 60-inch screen on the wall. You can just watch the movie, with the headset and pin it to wherever you want to pin it. Right? So you'll be watching movies, straight 2-dimensional movies that way.
Yeah.
But of course, we can come along. I'd say The Matrix is a good example. We can come along now and do visual effects, which are specific for that. So now you're sitting there with the bullets going past your ears, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And so we won't do that for the whole movie, but during key scenes, we will immerse you in that. So you'll be watching a 2-dimensional screen like you do at the moment, but we can take you into that. So the dinosaur, for example, being the other example, at the moment, it's cut off, that. Whereas next time you have to follow it all the way up above your head. That makes sense?
Yeah.
If you go to, if you've been, or the listeners have been to the Sphere in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But that's the example that you said, you look up and you see
it never ends.
It's just like, I loved it. I was, and we're doing projects for the Sphere at the moment.
Oh, wow.
And so basically the planes, the barriers, not that they're going, because they never were there, other than the technology couldn't do it, so to speak, at that point. But so stories are going to go to many places. But the bit I'm very excited about is that the directors out there who's going to deliver the VR experience, the game experience, they'll carry the story like Hitchcock. Hitchcock used to carry the story, and he'd only film what he needed, so he could prevent the studios recutting the movie because he didn't give them enough material to recut. Right? And Spielberg's the same. Spielberg has the entire movie in his mind, and he's already editing. I remember when we did War Horse with him, I saw him on the last day of the shoot. He was doing a shoot down the country, and he had edited it up to the film up to the previous evening shoot.
Wow.
Mind. So therefore, there's someone out there who, like Spielberg and Lucas, who can see this going forward. They must already exist, because otherwise it'll be 20 years before they're old enough.
Right.
So someone's out there at the moment who will be the first person who will be delivering a story across different platforms, who I'm desperate to find.
Oh yeah, I can't wait for that world.
So and like I say, it was Lucas in 1977 and Alfonso Cuarón, obviously, in with Gravity and things like that. So these people are out there. And also the producers are out there, because, as I say, David Heyman and Duncan Kenworthy are two of the people who've enabled and had the vision themselves to support the innovation in the first place. That must never be overlooked.
Yeah, it's about the creative talent that uses the new technology to just make something new happen, right?
And all we're doing is supporting them.
Fascinating. Thanks.
This has been fascinating, and I could sit and talk to you for 3 hours, because there's never time on set to speak to the people on your side of the team, because I'm always running into costume or hair and makeup or learning my lines or rehearsing or practicing a stunt badly. So it's really, really lovely to be able to drill into your world for an hour. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.